and welcome along to another episode of the Kids Media Club podcast. I'm Jo Redfern.
I'm Emily Horgan, and Andy Williams is here with a guest.
Yes, indeed. We have the brilliant Steve Smith from Beakus, who's an animation producer extraordinaire, and is going to tell us a bit about his experience on Big Lizard, which is a new animated series he's got out at the moment. Steve, could you give us a kind of brief introduction in terms of what you do and maybe a bit of an introduction about Big Lizard and kind of how that came to be?
Sure. So I run a studio called Beakus, which is based in Lewes, down in East Sussex. You have to excuse my voice if you can hear it. Sorry, that it's a bit raspy today. But I've been running that for about 14 years. And we started off doing commercials. I ran another studio before that, but decided when my first child was born, actually, to set up it fresh in Lewes. And started off doing commercials, but worked with the BBC quite a bit for their stings and idents and things on channel. So got involved in the kids space quite early and saw an opportunity when they approached us to work on Num Tums, or the Num Tums, I think it was, series 1, which is quite different from series 2 and 3 if you've seen those. And loved that process. Took a big gamble with us to make that with them, but it gave me a sort of door in to sort of explore longer form series of our own, or the idea of working on longer form series, which I knew nothing about at all, and ended up making a show called Oliver Bob Top in 2017 to 2019, that kind of time, 2 series of that, and then collaborated with the people who made Num Tums to make Yakadee. That was the second series we made a lot of that. And then recently, over the last, too numerous years to mention, tried to get Big Lizard off the ground, which is thankfully just on CBeebies right now, and a couple of channels around the world so far, with many more to come, hopefully. But it's been a bit of a passion, long burn process, learning a lot. That's what we're doing.
Great. And is it worth maybe having a quick look at the trailer for Big Lizard just to give everyone a taste?
Be my guest.
Right. So this is slightly new for us, this multimedia experience.
Yes, we did it!
Everything I need is right here with me now.
Okay, we'll watch the video again.
Oh, congrats. That's lovely, Steve.
Thank you very much. Fills my heart with warmth watching that, actually. I feel really very connected with that series, obviously.
I really love Josh Widdicombe's voice. I watched an episode the other day, and it just suits. It's a really good choice.
Yeah, he was a shoo-in for the part because the character is a cross between a sort of nerd and a dad, and he epitomises both, which is basically a nerd, isn't it? Because lots of people are dads, but he's right in the space because he's got a young child, so young children. Sorry, so he's perfect for this role, and as soon as he spoke, it was perfect. Yeah.
And what was the inspiration behind the show? So you said it's been quite a journey getting to having it on screen. What was the kind of the initial spark for it?
Yeah, well, So I known a director, French director called Amé Alisnar, for quite a long time. We worked in commercials together when I first set up Beakus, and he actually made these lovely short explainer sort of films for the Royal Observatory in Greenwich, to go on their website to introduce children to science. And so weirdly, he was in that sort of vein before he came up with this idea. But although I set up Beakus in 2010, and he actually came up with the idea in 2011,
Wow.
but we didn't talk about it until 2017/18. So he had an idea about a dad living on a alien planet with a giant lizard, basically, and it was, as an idea, it was great, and it was charming to look at his visuals because he's such a great designer, because he designed Big Lizard as well as directed it.
Right.
And so, he sort of developed it as an adult comedy, and sort of talked to a few people in France about it before he sort of opened up to me and said, what do you think of it? And of course, I was in the kids space. I was interested in preschool stuff, and so I sort of thought with the visual as well, it would really suit well if it had a girl lead. So the man became a dad. And it's to the credit of the production and all the people working on it, and to Amel himself, it kept true to what that vision was, really, because it's a series about people stranded on an alien planet with a big lizard, with lots of elements of sort of science and adventure and curiosity, and friendship, actually, between the sort of these two disparate people, or creature and person. So 2011 was when he had the idea, but he didn't come to me till 2017, 2018. By end of 2018, middle of 2018, we went to Cartoon Forum and tried to pitch it, because I'd heard that was the thing to do, and put in an application to pitch, and got in without really knowing what that meant. And you have to make a teaser trailer, so that was suddenly drop everything and do that, which really accelerated the process of development for sure.
And I love it because it's got that educational element to it, like that STEM and kind of and learning. Like how did you feel? Like how have you held that in the series? How have you tried to make the series connect but also entertain and educate?
I think a priority for us was entertainment, because to be honest, I've made lots of different types of shows, but if the child doesn't want to watch, they're not going to learn any education within it. So it's a softly, gently approach. It's kind of like saying, do you know there's something called science? And here's bits of it. So we drop into little elements of it. We show like solar eclipses, friction, learn what friction is, lots of flora and fauna. I mean, the other genius thing, possibly the best thing about it, is that it's set in prehistory. So they land on a planet which, to give it a synopsis, is the planet is actually the nearest exoplanet to us that could have life, if for real, called Proxima b. So they land on that, and we just pretend that it's actually way behind us in terms of its evolution. So we get to see creatures before dinosaurs existed. So we see trilobites and ammonites and Dunkleosteus and stuff like that. So it's really unusual to see it in animation. But going back to your point, it's really softly. We didn't want to. We sort of threaded it into the narrative. So they need friction to get their buggy out of the sand, for example, or the triple. Well, there's 3 suns on Proxima, so an eclipse is really quite exciting. So we just softly is the theme.
And what's the core demographic, Steve, and how many of these have you made?
So it's a series of 52 7 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's for 4 to 6 year olds. At least that's the top end of CBeebies age on CBeebies channel. But our stories do peak sort of slightly more complex than that. So I think 6 to 7 would be an ideal age group. Which kind of brings us on to the idea of co-production, because it was a French co-production.
Mm.
And so the French broadcaster is France Television, and their remit is really to go for sort of 6 up, not younger. So
right.
so although we have two broadcasters sort of on the sort of edges of the sweet spot in the middle there, they they both actually agreed very clearly with the plan and with the type of narrative and the complexity of it and the comedy and all that stuff. So we ended up actually pitching handing something to CBeebies that would actually sit relatively well on CBBC and sort of be a sort of what they call bridge between the two. And hopefully that means it reaches a nice wide audience, but also transitions sort of preschoolers into the idea of learning science at school and all that sort of thing. That's the idea.
That's fascinating. So did you know early on then that there would be different expectations from the French audience and the UK audience, and had to kind of tailor your kind of creative to kind of hit that target, really?
Yeah, it wasn't actually hard to write for that age group at all. It was something that the head writer, myself and Amel and our consultants really got straight away. I think the hardest thing is sort of pitching a show with that age bracket to lots of different broadcasters and seeing who's interested, because they either sit below or above, and you kind of struggle to make your point that there's a child in the middle there who's getting a bit lost. So I think we always said to CBeebies it was right at the top of the age, and we always saying to France Television's right at the bottom. We're just honest about it. We didn't migrate between the two and then get the job and then hope that we could do some stories really simply and some not. It is what it is. It was sort of comedy is a big driver for excitement for kids to watch, and so we just tried to keep as much comedy in there so that an audience of a wide age group still appreciates it, regardless of whether they're understanding the narrative completely or they're just watching the slapstick falling about.
And the journey of a producer is a long one, as you've alluded to. So when you started the journey, you talk about your two main broadcasters bookending that age group. How, tell us about the journey of the series, getting the funding in place to even get going on this thing.
How long have you got?
Give us the abridged version.
Yeah. Well, it kicked off with Cartoon Forum, and we couldn't have gone to Cartoon Forum if you don't have the support of a broadcaster. Right. And you can't even go to Cartoon Forum now because Brexit happened. So luckily this was before Brexit, and we got the chance to go. It was always going to be a French co-production because Amel was in London but now lives in Paris. So we always wanted to be a French co-production. And the BBC liked it when they first saw it, which is, obviously fantastic for us. We were very lucky. And that enabled us to go to Cartoon Forum, and then came away from that expecting everything to fall into place because it went down extremely well. Lots of people loved it, did a good job with the pitch, and then all the negotiations started, and France Television had it on their radar already, because Amel had made moves towards them with his adult show version, I think, even before. So they were always a sort of likely candidate, but you can't pitch formally to them, as in you can't get a production from them unless you're French, unless they're acquiring it after it's been made. So we were obviously asking for money to make the actual show. So we had to find our co-producer in France, and that took about a year. Not that it was hard to find someone; it was more almost trying to decide who would be the best partner. I think that was the complex thing. And Amel was very grounded there. He worked in the industry a long time, so he knew lots of people. So he had a lot of decisions to make himself, turning some people down and taking on someone else. So we took on Je suis bien content, who are a very established studio. But then their process began of sort of ramping up to how do you actually make this series? How do you actually finance this? Because I'd done my end of the deal. I sort of had the BBC on board, and a few other things in terms of finance. So like putting in some of my own money and things like that. And organising music publishing, a little bit of money here and there. And theoretically the UK tax credits as well, which is what I'd hoped to put in, which didn't work out, which I can explain later. But so the UK part was sort of financed, and I was only ever going to do the sort of pre-production stuff and voices really, because I'm a remote studio, so I work with everybody remotely. So in France, obviously, you've got big studios with lots and lots of animators, so they're set up to do that much more than I am. So the majority of the budget, the majority was going to be spent over there, so they needed to raise quite a lot to finance that, basically. So there's all sorts of manner of things they had to do, including finding another co-producer in Belgium to look for Belgian funds as well. So we had to get bits of money from all over the place: French tax credits, regional funds, so all different parts. And then finally, when France Television said yes, they only say yes if they can take us through a development period with them. So unlike CBeebies, who just kind of commit to a project and trust you to make it, and also sort out anything in the pre-production, France Television wants you to prove it sort of as much as possible before they give the bulk of the money over. And so we did basically a year's worth of development with them.
Right. And what does that entail, the development for that?
16 scripts and 1 animatic.
Wow.
Which
Okay.
At the time it was like 16 scripts. I mean, you could stop at 4 or 5 and probably know what it's going to be. But the message from France was basically that they very rarely back down after giving you development money, because otherwise they'd be losing their money. So these 16 scripts became 16 scripts that we made into episodes, and so nothing was lost. It was just, we took an awfully long time over 16 scripts, if you look at it that way, in terms of production.
Mm-hmm.
It was a luxury, a poorly paid luxury, but it was better. It was so good for the project to have spent that much time. I mean, whenever do you get that much time to actually think about the whole thing?
Yeah. And those scripts, did they stay pretty? Were they kind of fixed really once you'd gone through that development period? It wasn't that you got the green light and then you went back to the scripts and kind of said, well, let's tear those 16 scripts up and then just start again. Were they kind of sort of set in stone a bit?
They were set in stone, really. What we actually did was the one we made into an animatic. We tore that apart and remade it in the animatic, which is stupid in a way, but to go back to script would be even more like destroying everything you've got. So we kind of rebuilt it from the animatic up, that one. I think there was 2 scripts that were basically almost there, but not quite. And once you'd written about 30 episodes, you knew exactly how to rebuild those and make them better, because you knew more about the show by then. Which again, if it had been straight into production, they would have been made already or animated, and you couldn't do anything about that then.
Yeah. And tell us a bit. So the tax credit funding, there was a bit of an issue there. Did you say? Like, tell us your tale of woe.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of something you obviously count on if you're making a show in the UK, or at least co-production where the content is, you have to pass the cultural test, and these are people in space with a giant lizard. So the cultural test, although you could argue it's
a French lizard.
It's a French lizard in the French version, yeah, but it's the UK, and the artist is UK, which is important. You could argue that there's no point in a cultural test and stuff, but in that sense, it passes because it's not set in France. It's not set somewhere else. It has British script writers writing British themed, ideas of education, etc. So I thought that was kind of safe and was formed part of my budget, but I sort of discovered well before we went into production, so not in any jeopardy, but for a UK production to do UK producer to do a co-production with I'm going to say another country, but it's probably a country that doesn't have a treaty with the UK. All the finance for the show has to run through that company, the UK-based company, in order to trigger tax credits. Basically, you have to have a view on all the money, and the UK producer has to be in charge of all the money. And with sort of 70% of it really being made in France, there's no way I could get the French government to pay me their tax money or something to me to pay back out to the French, or the broadcaster to pay that way. So we basically couldn't claim it, which means that all the pre-production that was done in the UK couldn't claim UK tax credit, which is quite a sizable chunk. But the benefit is that the French tax credit is pretty much the same, and they have access to regional funds and some other funding that we don't. So, it was better that they, like, rather than me claim everything through the UK, them claiming everything through France was much better, actually.
Because it feels like this was all put together very much on the doorstep of Brexit as well. I mean, did that factor into some of the wrangling too, or was that more of an after the fact thing?
Yeah, no, it's funny. Brexit was before we got into production, so yeah, finance wise, it didn't change anything. It's quite funny, really, because at the time, obviously, everybody was about, oh, it's going to change everything. We're not going to be able to do this and that and the other. And the main thing I still think is happened to us is because we can work with any other country just like you would. It doesn't matter if it's not in Europe or whatever. But I think the main difference is really access to to European markets, like Creative Media Fund, which I accessed for a previous project and was extremely helpful. And I could have accessed it through the French, but the deal there is that you have to have the European producer has to have 50% of the rights or more, and obviously that's a hell of a lot to hand over when you've been working several years towards something. So that and the tax credit situation is the biggest problem, I think.
And do you think that producers, I mean, you've lived this, do you think producers on the whole are really aware or set up to cope with all of these almost kind of legislative barriers and hoops that they have to jump through?
Depends who you speak to.
I'm not trying to prompt anything. It just seems like it could be almost the death of a project.
Oh gosh, I think it's the death of many projects. Absolutely. It's the bit where people say you really have to persevere in this industry and believe in your project and follow it through. And I see loads of people who are doing that and not getting anywhere, and therefore, penniless or whatever, having a really hard time. They should be doing something else. It's not necessarily. I mean, I couldn't say like my project over somebody else's. Oh, I should carry on and you shouldn't. Everyone's trying to carry on because you have to get past that bit, that hump sort of thing. But no, I don't. It's funny because I never trained to be a producer. I never went anywhere and learned how to do it. So it's all about talking to people and finding out the hard way. Oh no, you can't do it this way because, and then resetting and thinking of another way. And generally, if it's about co-production, then the co-producer wants it to happen, don't they? Because they're invested in it too. So then they help you a lot once you get them on board. I think it's just me and myself and the director were pretty hardball about rights and stuff, but only because we'd been on it so long. It just felt crazy to hand away stuff too easily. Not to say that it wasn't a good deal for everybody. I think it was a really positive deal, but I think that's something you couldn't learn anyway until you're presented with this option. There were times when I'd happily have had my hand or bitten off the hand of somebody who wanted to fund and take quite a bit because nothing was happening, and it was only up to me to drive it forward again. And other times where I'd be like, no, why am I giving all this away? I've slaved so hard and it's a beautiful project. I believe in it. All the rest of it's going to do really well. You convince yourself of that. I think producers are. I think they're a very sorry bunch because it's very hard to get anything going, and all we really want to do is make stuff. And especially when you have a really nice project in your hands, it's like, why can't you just? It's very hard to convince people, but that's our job.
Yeah, and talking about that kind of relationship with the creator relationship with the director, and having to kind of wrangle teams in France and coming from the UK. How did that kind of collaboration affect the storytelling or kind of the animation style? Did it have kind of an impact there?
Definitely had an impact on storytelling. I mean, we wrote about just over half the scripts in the UK and a bit less than half over there. And the nature of the storytelling was slightly different basically every single script you could, it was one way or another. It was sort of, the way I sort of try and explain it is it's sort of a little bit more linear in the French version. So they have an end point to get to, and they're making everything happen to get there. Whereas I think in the UK we tend to have a circular route. And I'm not saying either is better. What one thing I remember really strongly feeling when we sort of knew it was going to be a French co-production is that we could take the best of both worlds, and so have some really compelling narratives that kind of cycle around and sort of drop a hint and then come back and get it later on. And at the same time, we can have a really driving action scene with some snappy posing and sort of very surreal sort of jump from here to there, and just something pop up and surprise us because we're on an alien planet, So there was the best of all of it, I think, in this show. But it was a challenge when we were trying to make the whole thing seem coherent, despite being written by two different teams.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the head writer was in England, and myself and him and Amel really worked hard on trying to blend what we were getting from both sides to make something that was, had a bit of both all the way through. So you don't get some episodes which are really crazy and some which are really educational, or, had to be a blend. And that was the hardest thing.
Interesting.
And where have you netted out with rights on the whole thing, Steve? Right, because it's with France TV, it's with CBeebies, but then the digital world is out there, and that's where I definitely bang the drum to say that's where kids are going. I mean, how does a producer try and navigate that area of, the show that you've made, that you love, that you really believe in, and how you're able to kind of get it to audiences in the way that they're expecting?
Yeah, it's an evolving landscape. It's something that I have to. So, I mean, one of the biggest challenges is that the show's just launched on CBeebies. We're still making episodes, and my attention really should be moving on to another project, or I don't know, or some service work or whatever to pay my bills, etc. But actually, I never feel like you can end this sort of journey of so many years and just drop it and move on, and hope that the show does well. And if CBeebies come knocking for a series 2, would I go, oh, well, okay then, I'm going to fight for that, by trying to give it the best push it can have at the very beginning. So I was explaining this to my French sort of counterparts, the fact that that's my job now, is to push it, and that's social media, that's licensing, everything you can think of. So I'll get to your question in a minute. I'm not really answering your question, but they were sort of saying that they're going on to the next project. That's how their business works. That's what their industry is about. It's the bigger studios with lots of people, so they're going on straight to the next thing. And they're to answer your point, really, they're my co-owners of this. The rights with both of us. And it's not a sort of conversation, a debate I've had with them about the fact that I'm going to do all this. What are you going to do? But it is in the back of my mind because it is a lot. It's a lot of work, and I'll be coming back to them with season 2 if it all goes well, and I'd like to sort of pat myself on the back if that happens. But in terms of rights and stuff, most of them sit with us together, and then it's about how we exploit them. So Aardman are the distributor for the show, which is great because they're a really obviously great partner for something which looks a bit plasticine and also sort of has a quality level I think they like. So they've obviously got the rights to sell the program itself, but everything after that still sits with us, and it's the next beginning of a very long journey, exploring what I can do with those rights. Not so much to monetize. That's not obviously that is the end goal for everybody, but to make sure it's seen. I think that's the have visibility of it. That's the main thing for me.
Yeah, make sure it's found.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So is that the next job on your task list? Now this thing is up and running and it's out there. What your distribution and scaling strategy is outside of your current platform commitments?
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. I think I need some of your expertise on this, but it's strategizing when you're one person is quite difficult because you have conversations with yourself and you sort of trying to separate out your time into the various things that you've got. So I am chasing other projects. That is, you have to be realistic about it. And there's a load of other things from my past, other series and stuff that I've worked on that I'm still involved in, obviously. So, which is still going on that journey as well. So I think you learn totally from every series you make and every journey like this, and the strategy becomes clearer. And I won't waste so much time doing things I did before that I don't need to do or didn't help. But there's, if you could wave a magic wand and give me a few 100,000 to spend on a Roblox game or whatever, I'd be there doing it because I know all these things are where I need to be and where I want this project to be. It's just so difficult to get there without partners who might come along who help. That's hopefully that'll happen soon enough. But it's an uphill journey, and not one that's time pressured as well in a way, because the longer you wait, the more successful the series might be in its first run somewhere. Might give you the stats to tell someone, please help me. So we wait and see, but yeah, it'd be busy trying to keep the mouse on the wheel in the meantime.
Yeah, that's the real challenge, isn't it? The discoverability, I think, for a new show.
Yes, I mean, CBeebies is a brilliant partner because obviously they have the biggest eyeballs on a linear channel, but they're dwarfed by YouTube or whatever off it. So it is available in one place only at the moment in the UK, with no rights to do it elsewhere. So it's about maximizing what you are allowed to do in those other spaces until the moment you can do more, or a continuous journey of trying to allow ourselves as producers who make shows to do more with what they've got.
And Kat, do you have any discretion to be able to tease or pilot any kind of episodes on YouTube as a sample of the show?
I think it's the sort of standard with the BBC that you can do about 2 minutes of straight content, and then you can edit. You can do a montage with lots of different clips. That's fine as well. But it's very difficult in a 7-minute show because you're telling a story over 7 minutes. It's very unlikely that you'll have a 2-minute section which starts bookends nicely. And you don't want to. I guess what you don't want to do is leave the audience thinking that was not very good. Didn't go anywhere or not interested anymore. Especially kids, if they're watching, they don't understand what's going on because it drops in the middle of something. So I will be doing some of that. But after all that, I mean, I think we need the YouTube audience to be like a sign that they want more. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
And outside of the UK, you mentioned it's obviously it's on air in France. What else is the plan? I mean, have Aardman secured more sales for you, or is it a little early yet?
Well, it went on Belgian TV first, RTBF.
Okay,
but it's only been on about a month, and then it's been about 2 weeks on France Television and a week on CBeebies, so it's really very early. And it's sold to Czech TV as well. That's one of the sales that has been done by Aardman, and they're obviously at MIP recently, last couple of weeks ago, selling it there. So I don't know. We wait and see. I do know there's a nice, and I could say a nice sale, but that sounds awful. A nice partner broadcaster somewhere in the world that I'm very keen on, and I know that's going to happen. So yeah, I just can't say what it is yet, but signs are really good. I mean, they get loads of lovely comments about it. It looks beautiful, and then once they get to see the actual episodes and they understand what the series is about, then hopefully there'll be more of them. Yeah.
Great.
Definitely
it looks fantastic.
A marathon, not a sprint.
Yes. Yeah. We want to find the right partners as well as the most money. I mean, as well as the.
It's okay to say that. It's okay. It's fine.
Yes.
You can always cut that bit, right?
No, that's the.
No.
And do you think these kind of French UK co-productions, can you see there being kind of more and more of those, or do you think the Brexit thing might kind of continue to be a barrier?
No, I very much think that it's a possible route. I don't know if I'm sure you're not aware, but there's a big push for co-production now because of everything happening in the landscape of streamers and stuff. So there's no one hit wonder that can pay you all the money and make a show for them. So not only do we need, as producers, need to co-produce with partners in Europe or anywhere, Canada, but the broadcasters need to collaborate together as well. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that really rang true was that there was a sort of inbuilt fear that had been around for a long time that that working with a partner in a different country makes it really hard. And actually, it might be to do with the show that there wasn't any arguments about what the show is, but certainly this process has been really painless in terms of the two stakeholders of broadcasters with their notes and stuff. Everyone agreed.
What? That never happens.
Maybe it can happen from here on. I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's not.
You're going to have a lot of people reaching out to you after this episode saying, "Tell us the secret, Steve."
I was going to say if I could tell you what it was, I don't know, but it wasn't. It wasn't from me sort of massaging the notes so that people read what they want to read and we carry on. It was genuinely that both parties saw the same ideas as each other on what the show should be, and therefore just tried to get us to push the educational aspect or the comedy or whatever it was that was specific about that episode, and they didn't really they never actually disagreed, so who knew?
Amazing.
So what would the big learning be if you had to summarize it after going through this process? And actually, it's not the end, as you said. Actually, it's just the beginning of the next stage. But what's the big takeaway?
The big takeaway? I guess, if I'm honest, when this project landed with me, when Amel came and showed it to me, and I fell for it, having faith that I wasn't going to be the only one is actually quite a big takeaway, which, I knew that it would take years. I warned him that it would take years, and but I didn't. I didn't lose focus from the fact it was going to happen. I actually 100% believed it was going to happen right from the beginning, and I think if you're a producer and you're making something and you don't feel that, like when you first see it and you think, well, this is quite good, and maybe I can get this away, then that is definitely not. Well, it could happen, but it's less likely to happen. And you can't see yourself going through 7 years or whatever fueled by that, can you? So I think those projects drop from the sky once every now and again. And if we're in the business of making TV shows, then we need to have more than one idea, and we need to sort of be selling them. Do you like this or do you like this? But the benefit of being a small producer, an independent producer, is that you can live with one idea for a long time and really go and get that one. I mean, that's partly why I think our industry is a little bit broke, from my point of view, from a producer's point of view, is because you have to follow a project through like that to get it made, and yet 4 to maybe 5 years of those are unpaid years. No one really thinks about that, or it's definitely not spoken about much, because you go to kids screen, there's hundreds of us doing that, so there's hundreds of us being unpaid for multiple years pursuing a dream, and it's only because it's a dream that's why people do it. But I think the more you make, the wiser you are about that. So when I saw that project at the beginning and knew that was the one, I'm so pleased that I carried on with it and persevered. And I think that would be my takeaway for people in my situation anyway.
Yeah. I think sometimes people have this image in their head of a producer being like that old Hollywood stereotype of the cigar chomping guy, kind of, that's maybe a bit cynical. but actually, I think the producers on the whole are idealists that work away for years and years often without getting money or credit. So
Yeah.
it's definitely.
Yeah, and also there's different types of producers, so I definitely term myself a creative producer because I'm as interested in the creative as I am in the production, and if not more so. And I'm just trying to make shows so that I get to make them, not because I understand how to make them, and like in terms of building teams, money, and all the rest of it, legal stuff. And I'm just much more interested in the narrative, and so or not the narrative, but the whole concept of something and it coming alive through animation. Animation's my love as well. So I was in a call today with somebody who knew a lot more about the finance of something than I did, even though I've made a show. So it's not like you get a lump of knowledge from having gone through it once. Their expertise was in something I hadn't done, but it's still raising funds for a show. And I don't think as a producer you need to be the cigar smoking guy who understands all of that and can just like put deals together. 90% of it for me is about choosing the right project and convincing other people that it's great, and then seeing it through to the end without losing that. And that's actually my job.
Amazing.
Thank you.
That sums it up.
It really does. And
Great.
you can see Big Lizard on CBeebies now?
Yeah, so it's on every weekday, 3:30. And there's already 25 episodes on iPlayer. So although the linear audience is really good, I think, but the fact that they're all there means that people can indulge in it a bit and get to know it really well. And then there'll be more, I think, in the new year. Because we're still in production, we won't be finished until December. Yeah. And go visit the www.biglizardtv.com. You can chop this bit, and any Instagram posts I do, because that's going to be my bread and butter.
Okay.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. It's really fascinating to hear the journey, and a real testament to resilience, and by the sound of it.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks, Steve. That's great.
It's a real pleasure.
Thanks, Steve. That was brilliant. I'll just play us out and just ask everyone if they could like and subscribe and, the usual shenanigans. And we'll see you next week.